Hey guys, welcome to the Mom Show. I'm your host, Courtney Doyle, and this is a place I am giving you permission to not have it all together. Welcome back to the show. Today, my guest is Trina Stegemann, and I'm so glad that you're here. I am a little jealous, though, that you're not physically here, though I know you're not upset about not being physically here because it's, 90 something degrees here in what we're classifying as fall in Texas, but you are in Colorado
Yes,
where, what did you say the temperature was?
the high today is 60. So yeah, it's feeling good. It's definitely fall. All the leaves are orange, yellow, and a lot of them already dropped down. And I know you're sweating over there.
We are sweating, and our leaves are falling too. But I think they're dying for
Yeah,
thirst, is what it
they're dead.
is. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. We've known each other now, gosh, Trina, like
Yeah.
5 years, I think.
I I feel like it could be even longer, but yes, somewhere around
It's
there.
possible.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you to take us to your story. This month we are talking about abortion, and I want you to share your story, and then we're going to jump into some questions and some conversations about it.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here with you. My story really starts, I think, back in probably late high school. I grew up in church all my life, was one of those like Sunday morning, Sunday evenings, Wednesday nighters, always there. And it got to a point where when I was in high school, I was just like, is there anything else? Like I see other friends live in other ways that I just kind of wanted to check it out. And so I did really. I had a friend who went off to college when I was, I think about a sophomore, junior, and I went to go visit her. And she was at the University of Texas in Austin. And we went out that night and partied, out on 6th Street like two idiots. And I remember that night we went back to her friend's dorm, which I thought was just a friend. And really what had happened was she kind of set me up in this place of I'm going to go hang out with my boyfriend. Here's this guy. And
Hmm.
I remember just being really like taken aback and shocked. And he like led me to his room, and unfortunately I was sexually assaulted. And that was like my first ever sexual encounter or experience. And so it was very much shocking. It was gut wrenching because I thought she was my friend. And then I wanted to keep it secret because I was mortified. I had been drinking, I was underage, I shouldn't have been doing that, and I knew
Were
that. And
you were
then
17?
I was, yeah, 16, 17, somewhere around there.
Okay. Okay.
And I tried to just pretend like it didn't happen. I mean, I
Hmm.
was, not to be too much, but just to be honest and vulnerable, like I was in a lot of pain. And I just remember just trying to like pretend like I was okay, pretend like I was fine and that like nothing had happened.
Hmm.
And same thing when I got home, I just tried to move on like everything was good, didn't tell anybody. Fast forward a couple of years later, which probably would have been then, probably would have been about 4 or 5 years later, when I was in college, I was president of my sorority. I was just having fun, like playing intramural sports all the time. I mean, I was having a great college experience. But I think that first experience that I shared with you really shaped what I thought and how I should. Like, if that was my first like sexual encounter experience and it was taken from me, well, I want to be in control now and I want to be in charge now. So
Hmm.
instead, not that I was like some big floozy, but I did date this one guy who was terrible for me and I knew it, but you're dumb and naive and you think you can change somebody. And he was in his fraternity, and we dated and I found myself pregnant and I was completely shocked. I was terrified. I was, like I said, president of my sorority, living in my sorority house, and I was just stunned. And I called him and I told him over the phone, I was like, because I hadn't been feeling well. And that was like the first clue, right? And so I called him and I was like, I think I'm pregnant. So I went and got a test, positive, like right away. And I saw him that night after work and he was like, don't worry, I've been here before. I know what to
Oh.
do. And of course, like imagine, how does that make you feel and think and this was not, I think there's a lot of different women that can fall on the spectrum of like, I had no idea, or, I didn't know what I was doing and all that. That wasn't me. I knew that what I was doing could lead to this. I just thought that it wouldn't.
Yeah.
And then same thing, like making that decision. I could have said no. I could have told my parents. I could have gotten help, even probably on campus. I'm sure there's probably at all
Hmm.
colleges some sort of way, someone to call, something to do. But I didn't. I listened to him. He called Planned Parenthood for me in Houston and made those phone calls for me. And like he even knew how to get the price discounted in order to have this abortion. And I remember those weeks because it wasn't right away that I could get an appointment. So I'm sitting there, they're telling me over the phone, like the earliest appointment we have is in 2 weeks. And I am mortified because what happens is when women find out they're in an unplanned pregnancy, panic sets in immediate, right?
Yeah.
And they think I have to figure this out right now. I have to take care of this right now. I have to handle it. That is the
Hmm.
most common response. And a lot of pregnancy centers will tell you that as well. And so at 2 weeks, I told them, I was like, if you wait till 2 weeks, I'm not going to be able to take the medication like I want to. I don't want to have a procedure. I don't want to have a surgery. And she told me on the phone, she's like, it doesn't really matter. And I was like, it doesn't matter that I'm just making sure you understand. It doesn't matter that I'm past the date when I'm supposed to be able to take this medication. And she's like, it doesn't matter. And
Mm.
so, of course, it matters. And I
Yeah.
can get to that in a minute. But, the 2 weeks go by. He takes me. I don't even remember what I told him. I think I had to miss a sorority meeting. I think I just told them I had to go home because my family's from the greater Houston area and came back with a medication and all by myself. He left, he went to work and everybody was at school and classes and everything. And all by myself, I took that second dosage of it. You take one and then you take the second one later and pass that sweet baby in my sorority bathroom. And it was devastating. It was devastating. And at that moment, I truly thought, and it's crazy the lies that you hear, but in that moment, I truly thought my sister's not going to be able to have kids. That's kind of the warped mindset that I have that it was like, this isn't just going to
Hmm.
affect you, Trina. This is going to actually affect your family. I'm not going to get married. Like, God's going to withhold that from me. These are all lies that I just immediately felt, not even just knew, but just like deeply felt in my soul that were going to be the case.
Let me jump in. How many weeks were you at
Yeah,
this
that's a
point?
great question. So, your brain does crazy things with trauma.
Hmm.
And so actually a lot of this I remember talking with my husband about it and I was like, was I 20? Was I 21 when this happened? Was I a junior or was I a senior in college? I really can't remember. And the same
Right.
goes for the weeks. I believe that the medication you're not supposed to be able to take past 10 weeks. And I believe that I was like 12 or 13.
It is interesting how in that traumatic situation, there's parts of that our brains can compartmentalize,
Completely.
and you just really don't remember. I don't remember this. I don't
Right.
remember that. But you use a word that I don't think people give credit to, which is it's trauma. This is a
Yes.
trauma, and I think that the reason why people don't consider it a real trauma is because it's a trauma bestowed on ourselves.
Yeah.
This isn't
Self-inflicted.
self-inflicted. Yeah. What happened to you when you were in high school and your roommate led you to this guy? That was a traumatic experience as
Right.
well that you did not ask for, you did not inflict on yourself, somebody inflicted on you. And I
Right.
think that when we talk about abortion as a trauma, it is self inflicted. It doesn't get the same forgiveness or the same, not that you need people to feel sorry for you, but empathy. There's
Mm.
no grace, there's no empathy because it's, well, that was self-inflicted. You did this
Right.
to yourself. Almost like, well, you made that choice. You deserve
Hmm.
to have that trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's even that way when it comes to the grief behind it too, because that was when I became a mom. As
Mhm.
much as society will tell you clump of cells, whatever, not true and very evident. That was when you became a mom. So not only is it a grief at that time, even still to this day, like I think back and I'm like, man, I would have about like a senior right now
Yeah.
in high school, which is wild to think about that.
Hmm.
Like we'd be doing college visits. We might be, doing such and such. And that is crazy to think about, but it's an ongoing grief. And the Lord has healed a huge part of me with that. But it is a grief, it's a trauma. You don't feel like you have the right to mourn that child. And you absolutely do. You absolutely do. And I know that that sweet baby is with Jesus. And that brings me so much comfort that one day I'll get to hold that baby and sing to him or her and hold. But right now I know that they're with Jesus.
So you're in college, you have to experience this by yourself.
Yeah,
Nobody is your closest friends, your sorority
right.
sisters. Nobody's even aware.
I told one sorority sister who went with me to get the test, and we drove like, of course, 30 miles away from campus because I was mortified I'd run into somebody. And she knew. But yeah, for the most part, with the exception of one, maybe two people, it was very much a secret. I ended up
Hmm.
stepping down from my role as president of my sorority. Everything just was compounded and it just felt like I was drowning, naturally so. How did I think I was going to be able to just go on like everything was normal. And so that was of course sad because I enjoyed that and I love that. And I felt embarrassed that it was like, oh, Trina can't cut it when really nobody knew what was going on. It was a
Hmm.
big secret. And shortly after I graduated from college, was still dating this guy kind of off and on. He cheated on me. It was bad. It was ugly. It was bad. And I remember getting a phone call from my mom and she said, "Okay, babe, you've graduated. You don't have a job yet, so we need to go ahead and pack it up and bring it home until we figure something out." And it wasn't like a question, it was just direct guidance. And it was exactly what I needed. I needed
Hmm.
somebody to come into my life and say, okay, come on, we're going to do this. And say it
Hmm.
gracefully and with passion. And my mom had no idea. And so I did. I moved home. And a cool part of my story that I love, the redemption piece of, is that, my sister was already married at that point for a couple of years. And within about, I got a job right away working for State Farm. And within about not even 6 months, less than that, within about 5 months, I got plugged in to a church with a really great young professional singles group and met what was going to be my future husband within 5 months. And I just
Hmm.
remember being in awe of God's grace because I thought, mercy, really, in awe of God's
Hmm.
mercy because I just knew I was like, I didn't deserve this. I don't deserve this.
Right.
But that's not how the Lord works.
It's interesting taking you back to those college days where you you're in your sorority house, you take
Mm,
this second pill that you've got adults. I mean, you were an adult, but you were also a child,
right,
an uninformed child of the reality of what was going to happen by taking this pill and the process your body was going to go through. And they're convincing you it's fine. You're not too
right,
far along. You were
right,
too far along. You've got to have this traumatic episode in a sorority bathroom. And immediately you're saying, it wasn't once and done and I can walk away from this.
right.
Everything about your life began to implode from that moment forward. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Everything I would say from the moment I realized that I was pregnant because I knew what the trajectory was going to be as far as the decision was already made. I knew what was going to happen. That moment was when I knew things were never going to be the same. But they
Mhm.
tell you, oh, so it'll be like a period. It won't be that bad. Here's some, just take Tylenol and Motrin. You can alternate between the two. And so I believed them full heartedly, thinking, okay, it won't be that bad. It was horrific. It was so painful. I don't know if you probably during childbirth is the only time I can remember that amount of pain where it causes you to throw up because your body is overloaded with pain. And that
Mhm.
happened. And I just remember like, what am I doing? Like I was fed and bought into a giant lie. And I'm
Mhm.
not putting the blame on them because it was not their fault. It was my fault. But was totally, I believed it. I believed it.
Mhm. Well, and I don't know if you've heard, a couple of weeks ago I interviewed Pat Layton. You know
Yes.
Pat very
Right.
well. the scariest thing right now is you can order this online.
Yeah,
You can
I
order
know.
this pill online and have it delivered to
No,
your front door. And
I
women are
know.
doing this, young girls are doing this
I know.
without understanding the reality
Right.
of how horrific this can be,
Right.
not just in the physical aspect of it, because the trauma didn't end in the sorority bathroom. It
No.
followed you. So let's
Yes.
fast forward. You've got a
Sure.
job, you're in
Yeah.
church camp, group, things are now going well. Like you just said,
Right.
you're seeing the mercy of God firsthand in your life. When does it come back up though?
Yeah, good question. So there were small little, what I love to call like God winks, right? So like again, I told you I found Rolf, that's my husband's name, very quickly, which I thought just wasn't going to happen. And then secondly, I told you how I had thought my sister was never going to get pregnant. Well, like within a year, she called me and told me she was pregnant.
Mm,
And so these things that I felt like the Lord was just like, that's not how I work, Trina. Like, I know that's what you think, but that's just not it. And Rolf and I dated, things were great. You know, when you have those endorphins and that special time, you're able to shove down a lot of things, right? I was compartmentalized. But those moments of just God being like, I got you. I got you. And I didn't tell my husband whenever we were dating, I kept it from him because I was thinking if he knows, there's not a
mhm.
chance that he would want to marry me, is what I thought, which was another lie that we buy into, right? But I just thought, if he knew the truth, he wouldn't want to be married to me. So I'm not going to tell him. But the Lord really brought that up about within a few months of us being married. I had a friend who in our Bible study class, she was talking about the topic abortion brought up. And every time, when you're holding that secret, every time that it gets brought up, you're like, everybody knows, everybody's looking at me like, you know,
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's
am
like there's
I
a red
do
light
I
that
have a
goes off above
sign
your
that's
head.
like
Yeah.
this one, she did it? That's what you're thinking.
Yes.
And of course no one did, and he didn't know. But I just remember thinking the Lord was like putting it on my heart gently. Like it was like, just here it is. I'm just going to drop it right here, just a little bit, right? No,
Mhm.
like slam, hit you in the face thing, but just a little bit. And about that time, a friend mentioned the movie Unplanned. Have you seen it? With
Mhm.
Abby Johnson, who worked at Planned Parenthood and her story of her abortions, but also working in the industry. And I'd heard about it and was like, oh, I should probably watch that. I don't know. We'll see. I ended up, God really just impressed upon me as things were getting brought up, you need to tell your husband. And so I did in tears. And I can, again, vaguely remember that conversation, but I do remember telling him and being so sad and so repentive. And not just of the fact that I had had it, because of course I was sad about that still, but the fact that I had kept it from him.
Mhm.
And he was hurt that I had kept it and shocked because he didn't think that that would ever be the case. And so that took some work to get through. And then I decided I really felt like I needed to tell my parents. And that was really interesting. And I remember we invited him over to my house. We sat around our Ashley's Furniture coffee table and sat there. And I just said, I know that you guys don't know this, but like I know some things were happening in college because I was sad, I was upset, and I told him what happened, and my mom wept with me. And not in a way that was condemning. I miss her so much. She was just the sweetest of she grabbed my hand and she just rubbed it and she said, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that alone.
Yeah.
Which was so healing, to hear your mom say that, because at the time when you're 20 something years old, you think it's condemnation, fire and
Right.
brimstone. But the real response would have been, I think, let's figure it out. Right.
Yeah.
My dad's response was a little less than what I had hoped. He responded and said, Trini, why are you telling me this? And I remember being like, well, that wasn't on my bingo card. And I was kind of taken aback because it made me think, well, why am I telling him this? But truth be told, you want to tell your family, you want to tell your father, your heavenly father, your earthly father, you want to tell them these grievances, these sins, because you want to be in good standing with them, right? The Bible tells us to confess our sins to one another. And that's what I wanted to do. But I
Mm-hmm.
think he goes, "Did you think that we knew?" And I said, "No." And he had said, okay, I just didn't know why you decided to tell us." And so that took a while to process. Years later, it came full circle, and he did tell me that that when he found out that they were pregnant with me, he was 44, my mom was 43. He said that he had these thoughts of, should we get an abortion? We're too
Mm-hmm.
old. Should we do this? I don't know if we can handle this. I'm
Mm-hmm.
44 years old. And that brought some closure for me to hear that, because he
Mm-hmm.
said in his own words, he was like, if I was thinking that, the Bible tells us that even if our thoughts are in these places, we might as well have done them, right? And that brought some healing and some closure for sure, for
Mm-hmm.
sure. But that movie, as you talked with Pat about the Bible study, Surrendering the Secret, the movie that I watched with Rolf unplanned, after watching it, I just turned to Rolf and I said, I know that the Lord can work all things for the good
Mm-hmm.
of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. But, and there's no but in scripture, but this is for me, but he's not going to do it if I don't let him, because that's the
Yeah.
type of God he is. He's not going to force anybody to do anything. So unless I decided to seek healing that I really needed and to be open and honest and vulnerable, with my community, with my people, God wasn't going to use it. And I
Mm-hmm.
wanted him to. And so that
Mm-hmm.
that got us started on the healing trajectory and path to finding freedom.
Would you have said at that point, though, would you have thought, because of your relationship with the Lord and because obviously you have a great relationship with your husband, and I'm sure he was very forgiving and understanding, and then your parents as well,
Sure.
did you feel at that point that you were healed, that you were free of this, or did you know
That's a good question.
there's more to this that I need to work on?
I think on the surface, I felt like I could get by. But did
Mhm.
I ever feel like I was fully healed or free? No. I knew that I wasn't. No. Because when you are, you don't experience the shame. And
Mhm.
anytime I heard the word, any commercial I'd see, anytime voting came up, and it was
Mm.
political and we were talking about, right versus left, and the guilt, immense shame. And I knew that that's not how the Lord worked, and that when you're freed, you're fully set free. You're not bound to that shame and that bondage anymore.
That's such a good point. Or when you're amongst, friends, and like you
Right.
said, you were in that Bible study and the conversation came up and you immediately felt like the red light was going on
Yeah.
over your head, and the fear of, being in a group of people and they start talking about abortion, and,
Right.
very
What
strong
do you say?
opinions surround the topic of abortion.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like, do you raise your hand and go, yeah, well, you're talking real bad about the people
Yeah.
that, how could, and it's the comments from people of, I could never make that
Hmm.
decision. How could somebody make that decision? I mean, they're, they're murderers, and all the negative things that are
Oh
said
yeah.
about people that make that choice. Nobody wants to stand up and go, well, you're talking about
Hmm.
me. Nobody,
Yep.
especially if you are still feeling such heavy condemnation and such heavy shame. It's like, how do you be the one that says, hey, you know what? The red light that's pointing, it is pointing at me and I own
Right.
it. And this is what God has done in my life. And so you're saying God just trickled little bits to you of, there's more to be healed here.
Hmm.
There's more to be discussed, that led you to say, I'm going to share this story because this is what God's calling me to, but I need to
Right.
do the work myself.
What really got me there was it was in our Bible study class. I was one of the teachers, and the topic that was my Sunday to teach on was about redemption and forgiveness and healing, basically. And
Mm,
I was like, oh my gosh, what a hypocrite am I? How the heck am I supposed to get up there and talk about that?
mm.
And it was freedom from our past specifically.
Oh
And I
gosh.
just, yeah.
Of
And
course
again,
God
that,
gave you that
of
lesson.
course he did. And I remember even thinking, I could sub this out. I could ask, my friend so and so to do it. This could be no thing. But I knew the Lord was like, come on, And so I talked
Mhm.
with my husband and I said, how would you feel if I shared my story? And he was like, babe, if the Lord is leading you to do that, I support you 100%. And I said, because
Mm.
this affects you too, right? Like, you're my husband. People may think differently of you. Let them, right? But it could happen. And he was like, no, I don't care. And so I did. I shared my story, and that was the first time ever in front of my Bible study class. And so sweet and so supportive and so kind was the feedback I received. But one friend in particular had said, have you heard of a program called Rachel's Vineyard? And I said, no, what is that? And she said, Rachel's Vineyard is a program for women who have suffered the loss of an abortion. And it's a retreat weekend. And they go through scriptures and prayer and a healing time for you to grieve and to mourn the loss of your child and to tell your story and be surrounded with other women in that
Mm.
same situation. And immediately I was like, yes, let's go. And so I looked it up, found the website, figured out the date that I could go. And actually, it's completely free, which I love. It's completely free. They fundraise so that cost and food and money are not an obstacle for this. And so I went. It was, I think, over 3 nights, 2 or 3 nights, where I got to mourn the loss of my child. I wrote a letter to her. I named to him or her, and we even had a small ceremony. And that, like a memorial service, and that, coming home from that, was what really sparked me to say, how can I bring this to people in my area, at my church, wherever, that need this same healing, that have walked this same path. And that
Mm.
is where Surrender the Secret has come in, where we met, and we're able to
Mm-hmm.
connect.
Mm-hmm. Because healing has so many layers. There's the physical healing that needed to happen back in the sorority house, right?
Right.
And then you've got the emotional healing and spiritual healing. And as you and I know, for so many people, that can take a lifetime.
Mm,
So many are not healed ever of
absolutely.
the emotional and the spiritual aspect of it because they have not done the work that is required of them to do, like the
Mm.
Rachel's Vineyard, or is that what you call it, Rachel's Vineyard?
Yes, Rachel's Vineyard, yeah, or Surrender the Secret. I
Or
mean,
surrendering the secret?
from Surrender the Secret, when I led it for a few years, I would have, and I partnered with my good friend Sue, we would have women come to our group who for 50 or 60 years they carried
Mm-hmm.
this secret around. And they're in
Mm-hmm.
their 60s, their 70s, and they're saying, enough is enough. I'm
Mm-hmm.
finally done, and I want to lay this at the feet of Jesus for good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they
Mm-hmm.
did. And they walked away lighter and brighter and told their family. And I mean, it's wild to think about that length of time
Mm-hmm.
to be holding that.
What would you say about the secret of abortion?
Yeah. The secret of abortion. It is not a quick fix. And it is something that, even though the Lord has brought me to a whole and a healed place spiritually, there are still ramifications for actions. And I very much think that, I still struggle with some anxiety and depression. If I'm just completely transparent, there can be seasons of my life where I struggle with that more than others. And I really believe that when we choose not to walk in the way that the Lord has provided and asked us to walk, that we do suffer the consequences. It doesn't mean he can't use it. It doesn't mean that he takes something broken and he makes
Mm-hmm.
it beautiful still. But I strongly believe that those choices, they do have some permanent effect on me. And I know that's the case for a lot of women. There's post-abortive syndrome, which has a lot of those factors, anxiety and depression, that they can struggle with for the rest of their lives. So the secret is not that, this is not a quick fix ever, ever. This will be with you forever. No matter what you hear, no matter what you're told, it's just not true.
Mm-hmm. The biggest lie that's being sold out there about abortion is that it's a quick fix. You don't
Right.
want that baby. It's just this, it's
Yep.
just that. And you can get rid of it and
Yep.
it's done. It's done. You can walk away and it's done. And you and I are living testimonies. And the other ladies that I've interviewed and the ones that are coming up are living testimonies. And you've got reference to women because you've led this study for so many years who are saying, hey, I've been holding on to this for 50 or 60 years. This is not a
Right.
quick fix. This doesn't just go away.
Hmm.
It does stay with you, and it does require work to get to a more whole, healed place. I
Yes.
also think that fear is a huge factor in somebody who is post abortive situation. Fear that something's going to happen to the next child, fear that you're being
Yes.
punished. What have you
Absolutely.
seen on that side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even in my own life, because I would have had the abortion and then I had my son when I was married, and then we lost two babies after my son. And that was, of course, any loss, but then that brings you back to this place of, did
Mhm.
I cause this? Is this my
Mhm.
punishment? Lord, are you trying to tell me something here? Should I not? You second guess and you wonder and you question, and it's horrific. And of course, we know that the
Mhm.
Lord doesn't work like that. I know that losing those two babies was not because that I had done this in my past.
Mhm.
It just happened, unfortunately. But it's easy to think like that.
Sure. What would you say was the hardest part of your healing process?
I think the hardest part was taking the first step. The first
Mm.
step for me was sharing it with people, my husband and my family, and then my Bible study class, right? But I feel like the Lord just honored that and
Mhm.
brought me healing with my mom, and then led me to this place of complete healing with Rachel's Vineyard by just taking that first step. And sometimes that's what
Mhm.
it takes. I was connected with a woman last week from the Houston area through my past women's minister who she was like, hey, can you talk with her? Y'all have a similar past and story. And we connected and talked. And I think that I was probably one of the first people that she had told outside of her
Mhm.
family. And just the way she sounded from the beginning of the conversation to the end of the conversation, sometimes that first step is just the hardest.
Mhm.
But it can bring a lot of relief and a lot of peace.
I had the pleasure of being in a Surrendering the Secret group with you and watching, and I had already done it once on my own. And
Right, that's
then when
right.
I did it in the group with you, I just remember sitting there that first night and the ladies entering that room
Mm-hmm.
and the look on their faces and the pain that they
Mm-hmm.
carried into that room, just even their countenance, the way their
Yes.
shoulders were held. And as we walked through that as a group, every week, Trina, they just were a little lighter. They
Yeah.
were just a little freer. They
I have
smiled a little
goosebumps.
more.
Even while you're saying that, yeah. It's
You
true.
could see the physical freeing, the emotional freeing, the spiritual
Right.
freeing. We were witness to it. And I just remember every week thinking, watching other people walk through this,
Mm-hmm.
and then by the end, they were different. They were
Yeah.
completely changed. Um, and it was because the forgiveness that they realized that they had, the awareness of where was God in all of this,
Right.
the awareness of what scripture says, that he will never leave you, he will never forsake you, that you are forgiven, that sin that left on the cross with him.
Yeah.
Um, just so many aspects of that journey are so healing and so freeing. And it's so incredible the way God meets us there. When we write the letter to our child, when we pray and we ask God, would you reveal to me? Was it a boy? Was it a girl?
Right.
And then when we do the ceremony, it's giving voice to that secret. And so once we can start doing that, then it gives us our voice back
Absolutely.
and gives us our confidence back. And so it's a beautiful process to watch. And gosh, I know that the first step, like what you just said, is the hardest step. What would you tell a woman who is listening to this saying, hey, that's great for you that you were able to admit it, but they're still living in the space of I could
Right.
never tell my husband, I could never tell my children, I could never tell my parents. What advice would you give that woman?
Mm. That's a great question. You know, as cliche, it's not cliche, but I feel like it could sound that way to say that number one, you're not alone. You're not alone. And the Lord is always with you. God it's hard to think about, but God was with you even when you made the choice, when you found out you're pregnant. If you did decide to have an abortion, God was always with you through that. And I would just say, if you have a friend that you can talk to about it, especially that's a believer, or if you're plugged into church, a women's minister that you can connect with. There's a lot of great pregnancy help centers, crisis pregnancy centers that are there for this very purpose. I oftentimes I tell other women, I share my story so much because if I ever am blessed enough to be able to be that phone call for someone, Trina, I know you don't know me, I don't know you, but I'm pregnant and this is what happened. I would love to be that person for somebody. You're not
Mm-hmm.
alone. No matter what you may hear, you're not alone. And I think truly that if we ask God for help, that he'll provide it, whether it's a person or a place to go to, but he sees you and he loves you and you're not alone.
Mm-hmm. And the encouragement of don't let it go 30, 40,
Yeah.
60 years
Right.
living with that pain. You don't have to. You don't
No.
have to live in shame and in fear and in silence. It's not necessary. You
No.
can you don't have to come on a podcast. You and I are doing something very
Right.
public, and
Right.
a lot of people do. And God's not calling each one of us to share our testimonies
Sure. Right.
to that magnitude, but there is such freedom in sharing it, even if it's just with
There
one
is.
person.
There is. And I think, I don't necessarily there would be women that would come from in our groups that would talk about, I don't know if I could ever tell this to my kids. I don't know if I could ever tell this to, my extended family. And I think that the Lord gives us discernment. I think that you can pray and you can ask, God, I've sought and I've received freedom from this now, whether it's through a Bible study group or a retreat. What is it you want me to do? Who do you want me to tell? And
Mm-hmm.
he'll put those people in your paths. And I feel like he'll make it clear because the answer isn't always, like you said, let's just shout it from the rooftops, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like the Lord gives us wisdom and discernment to know, and he puts those people in our lives to share it with.
Like you said, it gets very political, and you've got the right and the left. And I feel like the most silenced voice amongst that are the women who have experienced abortion,
Yeah.
because we're not in either category, and people are telling us how we're supposed to feel about this. And the
Mm,
reality is it is loss, and it is grieving, and it is all these layers of healing that we need, but it's still a secret that is kept by so many women,
right.
because I think it's so politicized,
Mm.
and there's so little forgiveness and empathy and grace and mercy for the women who have had to make that choice. What would you say to that?
I think a lot of women buy into that belief that because I've done this, I can't be against it. And it's just simply not true. I mean, you can break that down to a lesser argument of like someone who smokes telling someone else who doesn't that they can't do it and that they shouldn't do it, right? It's you're listening to advice from someone who has walked it and someone who knows better. That's what makes someone wise. Listening to someone else's advice so they don't have to maybe
Mm-hmm.
experience it. And so to say that and to think, well, then I just got to keep out of it. I got to keep my voice quiet, or I'm not allowed to have a voice in this section. It's just a lie. Instead, it's my personal opinion that our voices should be louder because of it. Because if
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to express what's happened to me and what's happened to you and to whoever to other women that have suffered this, maybe and hopefully and Lord willing, those women can hear it and understand it and say, yeah, I don't want to be there. I don't want
Yeah.
to do that. I don't want to live like that. I don't want to have those continued circumstances of any other ramifications that could happen. And so, I mean, I think that's just a big lie. It's a big lie that
Mm-hmm.
and the shame is what brings that, right? You feel shameful, so you feel that way, but it's a lie. And we combat, the best way to combat a lie is with the truth. And the truth is that God uses all things for the good of those who loved him and are called according to his purpose. And if he can use my story for someone else to understand, not to do it or not to be put in that situation, then it was worth it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. You're so right in the word of our testimony and sharing that because we have experienced it, because we are the voice of experience, and we want to prevent other women from being in this group, right?
Yeah.
And the biggest concern is this lie that this isn't a real baby,
Mm,
this argument of
right.
when does life actually begin?
Yeah.
And you've got all these, young girls that are so influential. And the other lie is that Planned Parenthood facilities, they don't care about you. They are
No. Yeah.
making money off of you.
Right. It's ridiculous. And I do encourage everybody to watch that movie I was telling you about, Unplanned. It does very much go over the scheme that is Planned Parenthood and how she needed to get her quota, her number of abortions up, that she was requested, you need to be hitting this target. And when a woman comes in, you need to tell them X, Y, and Z, and they can't do it, and they're not old enough, and they don't have the support. There's one goal in mind, and
Hmm.
it's not to help women.
Hmm.
There's no health care that anyone on the planet receives that actually kills another person. That's called health care. But it just
Mm.
doesn't exist. There's no medical procedure anywhere within, for some reason, this realm where the death of another human being is called health care. It's
Mm.
just not. It's an oxymoron. And so these lies, you have to confront them with truth. Charlie Kirk was fantastic at discussing abortion and women's health care. You can see my air quotes there. Allie Beth Stuckey's a great resource. And I think there's a lot of the younger generation that is coming up and shedding light on this, and
Hmm.
that are going on social media and talking about it. And it's a lot more than what I saw when I was, growing up or even talked about. And so I appreciate that. I think there's a lot more good information out there than there used to
Mm.
be.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you on that. And it's definitely a something, because it's so easily accessible now, that our voices have to be louder to
Absolutely.
combat that. It's not good enough to just say, yeah, don't do it. We've got to share our experiences, and
Right.
even if it is just with one other person. Pat Layton says that in our interview. She says there is no government that's going to stop it. There's no
Yep.
there's really no other resource that can stop abortion like the word of a woman's testimony who has
Yes.
experienced it.
Yes, absolutely. Amen. And that's why I am so vocal and open about it. And I tell people all the time, if you know someone or if you hear or whatever the case may be, share with them my phone number, share with them my email, let them know. I'm happy to talk with them about it because we know what it's like. And I don't wish that upon my worst enemy. Truly
Mhm.
don't. I don't.
Mhm.
And so the more information that's out there, and the more people that are willing to share their own personal experiences, I think the better.
Mhm. I agree. Thank you so much for your experience and your willingness to share your personal story, and then what you have seen, the healing that you've seen other women experience through Rachel's Vineyard and surrendering the secret, and the willingness to share their story with others. I'm going to link all of the information
Yeah,
that you're going to share with me, so that if somebody is like, okay, I'm willing to tell somebody, they could get in touch with you, they could get in touch with
absolutely.
me. We're here to chat with you. We're here to pray
Yeah,
with you and to get you on the path of healing that you deserve. None of us deserve to live with this shame and this fear and this feeling that we're not forgiven, because that is not why Jesus came. He came
that's right.
and he forgives, and there is hope. And the greatest hope of our stories is that one day we will be reunited with our children. And what an
Amen.
exciting day that will be.
Amen. And one last thing I want to say is that Jesus
Please.
did not shed any extra blood for your abortion. He nailed it and laid it all at the cross. And so
Hmm.
there is true healing and there is true grace and forgiveness and mercy. And don't buy into the lie.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Trina. You're
Thank you
such
for
a
having
blessing.
me.
Always
I'm
have
so glad to
been.
have
I
been
love
here.
you.
Thank you so much. I love you too, friend.
Thanks, Trina.
Alrighty. Bye bye.
Thanks so much for listening to The Mom Show with Courtney Doyle. Remember to check the show notes for any links, books, or resources that are mentioned in each episode. We want to be sure this blesses other mothers. And in order to do this, if you're listening via podcast, be sure that you like and share. If you could write a review, that would be fantastic. It helps us get in front of other moms. If you're watching via YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button. This way, you won't ever miss an episode. We want to make sure that we increase our reach to other mothers who need a little encouragement, a community, and a whole lot of Jesus. We're so glad you're here.